success. So I'm going to be talking about some of what I did last week because I flew around a lot and lit some stuff. And hopefully answering some of your guys' questions. I apologize if there's input lag on the audio. Honestly, at this point, I'm not going to bother troubleshooting it because it's not worth the time it's going to take, I don't think. Well, I can peek at it really quickly while we wait for a few more people to drop in. So if everyone wants to watch and listen to this madness. Oh, you know what it might be? Let me try one other thing because I feel like we messed with the setting once already. If I turn this one up, turn this one down, settings, properties, filters. Is that any better? Let me know if that seems any better or not. If it doesn't, that's fine. Let's pull this off of here. Okay, so we're going to go through some stuff that I shot last week in California, both San Francisco and LA, and in Chicago. So we're going to go through some of this interview stuff. Let me double check that this is working. I'm still figuring out this whole like scene switching thing in OBS. There we go. Okay, so we're going to go through this setup, which hopefully will be cool, as well as this. You know, these are just tights. But we're going to go through that setup. We're going to go through, which one of these I want to talk about? Let's say this one. We're going to go through this setup and how that works. And then last but not least, we're going to briefly go through this 3-camera interview setup, which unfortunately I don't have the footage for, so I only have 3 sort of suboptimal frame grabs to show you, but you'll get the gist of it. So that's basically the plan. Hopefully you guys dig it, and hopefully we can learn something together from it. So how's everyone doing out there? Is the lag any better, or did I make it worse? Trying to see. Oh, there we go. Turning my little tablet back on in case I want to sketch on any frames. I'm not very good at it. I'm no Matt Workman, but I can try. So everyone's good? Everyone can see and hear okay? Excuse me. Probably shouldn't do that right into the mic, right? I should also probably move my coaster closer to here. I feel like I should re-expose my talking look. We'll just punch the key up a little bit. Okay. Do this again. Blam! Back to this look. So first off, thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this. Whether you were planning on it or not, I appreciate your taking the time to be here. Hopefully it's helpful. Sorry, I'm just resizing this window so I can make sure that the live stream's still working. Oh, that's weird Inception. You can see that I'm monitoring it now. It's just OBS. Anyway, so the point of this is to go through those setups that I already talked about. And the way we're going to go about that is to show you how they looked and then talk through the process, hopefully, of how they ended up looking that way. So the first thing I would say is that last week was really interesting because it was three jobs crammed back to back to back. So maybe that's worth briefly talking about. Let's see. For some reason, my like Apple Calendar keeps pulling. Dang it all! Keeps pulling all the Facebook birthdays into it, and it drives me nuts. I gotta figure out how to kill it. So let's turn this off. So basically, the way that this week played out was that when was I in Canada? I was in Canada somewhere in here. I was in Canada these days. So went up 14, 15, 16. Then I don't think we had anything important these days. And then we were supposed to go down to the Cape Monday, but my Phantom got delayed getting shipped, so we ended up going down Tuesday morning, shot for Mass Maritime Tuesday, Wednesday, came home Wednesday night, packed Thursday, Friday morning, I flew to LA. We shot in LA Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Tuesday morning, I flew to San Francisco. Scouted in San Francisco Tuesday. Set up and shot Wednesday. Wednesday night, I flew to Chicago. We got into Chicago at 1:30, got to our hotel at 3. Shot in Chicago Thursday, Friday, and then I went straight from Wrap Friday to the airport and flew home to get home at 1:30 in the morning Friday night. So it was a crazy Friday to Friday sprint of getting a whole bunch of stuff done. But it was cool, so I'm glad to be working. Can't complain about that, but it definitely does beat you up a little, just traveling all that and figuring out how to pack everything you need and whatnot, because I needed to, fly with everything that I would need for 7 days, but didn't want to check a million bags. And so I got it down to one. The only bag I checked was my Easy Rig bag, which also I padded with, had like clothes and base plates and some stuff that could get beat up in there, and then all the critical stuff went in 2 carry-ons, so it wasn't too bad. But that was basically the trip, and I'm going to talk through those projects, maybe 1 or 2 setups each, in chronological order. So we'll start with LA. LA was interesting because it's a documentary for a director from Winnipeg, Canada, and it was a project that we've been talking about for a while. It's a really cool story and something that I was really interested in, and it was really cool because the director and I sort of were really vibing on like where we wanted to go with the aesthetic of it. And so, the conundrum was, how do you make something look as good as possible with relatively limited resources? Because you've got me and him, and you've got his like business partner, and that was basically it for crew. And so I was like, well, I can bring the Amira. We'll shoot everything mostly Easy Rig. They brought their Red Scarlet as like a B cam for interviews and stuff. And we had to sort of figure out a plan for like, how do you make this look good without a ton of people and without a ton of gear. So we needed minimal gear, and we needed to control what we could. And so I sort of decided that I didn't want to fly with lights because I didn't want to have to take them to the 2 jobs after the fact. And so we contacted a grip and lighting house in LA, got a few C-stands. I can actually probably pull you up exactly what we got. Let me see. Grip. I have to remember what the place is called. I think it's Express. Yeah, here we go. These guys were awesome, by the way. Would highly recommend them. I don't know if I ever got like an updated quote, honestly, because the director and the Ron from Express were sort of talking to each other. But here's what our order looked like at one point. Let me switch this over. Dang it. Which setup is this? Command Shift 2. There we go. And so this was sort of the order that I put in as what I would love to have in a perfect world, and this is what I asked for a quote for. So an M18, basically what you have here is a regular M18 with the stuff that comes with it. They just list the accessories separately. A DF50 Hazer, which comes with Hazer fluid, 5 C-stands, 5 50-foot stingers, 5 20-pound sandbags, 2 24x36 solids floppies, so just negatives, 1 4x4 silver and white bounce, 1 platypus clamp, 1 6x6 frame, 1 3-riser combo, 1 grip 3-riser combo, and 2 sets of Quasar Kinos. So this technically wasn't exactly what I originally asked for, because I originally asked for 2 2-foots and 2 4-foot Quasars. They came in Kino housings, which was cool, which I was totally down with, but they were all out of 4-foots, so we just ended up getting a 4-bank of 2-foots and a 2-bank of 2-foots. Is that all making sense? Everyone tracking with me? Hopefully the stream is still going well. Let me see real quick. Boop, boop. It says everyone's watching, so I think we're good. And so this is sort of, to me, this is a good little flexible kit for something like this, because Hazer is always good to have. An M18 is a good punchy light, but we don't need a generator for anything. It's the punchiest light we can actually run without a generator, as far as I'm aware. Then we need a few C-stands, and I assume we're going to need, 2 for the quasars, and then we have 3 more for modifiers, so if we end up running the floppies and the bounce or something, we have 5 C-stands total, which I think is a good number. Silver white bounce, which we can use for exteriors or interiors if we need some fill, whether interior or exterior. We have a 4x bounce. We ended up scratching the 4x4 bounce because it didn't fit in the van with everything else in it, and so we had to replace it with a 2x4 bounce. But other than that, we changed it. Everyone's just silently learning. So we cut it to a 2x4 bounce, because generally a 4x4 will fit in like a grip van or like a minivan or something. But you need to actually have space, and we had so much stuff stacked up because we had 4 people, all our luggage, their luggage from Winnipeg, the gear I flew with, and all this gear in one minivan. So we crammed it in there. So 4x4, it's just like a beadboard, like a foam core sort of thing. And then a platypus clamp, which I probably have one under my desk, but I'm not going to pull it out. It's just like some people call it a duckbill clamp. It's just a little clamp that holds these sort of bounces and whatnot, if we want to put it on a stand. Brought a 6x6 frame because I brought my 6x6 rags. So I brought my unbleached my bleached muslin, light grid, and my 6x Ultra Bounce. Or actually, I think I technically packed an 8x just because I had it around. And so I was like, we'll just have a frame. We can sort of, use that to be a crossbar and stuff if we have to. 3 riser combo, that's for the M18. And M18, if you haven't used one before, has a male, I don't know what it's technically called, like a male baby pin, dang it. Coming off the bottom of it. Of course, now I'm not going to be able to find a picture of one. But it goes into a combo stand. Like, here we go. It goes into the, female side opening of a regular combo stand. So this pole has to go into something, and so it doesn't... I mean, I wouldn't put one on a C-stand anyway, because you'd probably kill somebody. But so... when you have a full-size combo stand, like let's say this guy, Matthews Sky High Combo Triple Riser, it has a female receptacle here, which the M18 drops into, and then it does have a male baby pin that can pop up too. But so we had one of these for the M18, and then we had one other one, which was for the 6x frame, which is what the grip one is, and that basically has a... see, I'm not enough of a grip to tell you the exact hip lingo names for all these things, but it's basically a really beefy grip head, sort of like this. And so that's for holding 6x frame and whatnot. So that's not what I'm looking for actually, but it's sort of like that. So we had those, and then the Kino Quasars are pretty self-explanatory. 5 stingers, because you have a DF50, you have an M18, you have 2 other lights, and so there you're at 4, and then if you have to string anything along to each other or power anything else, you might as well have a 5th. You don't necessarily need 5, but I figured it's worth it, and 50 foot's kind of a good, 25 foot works 80% of the time, and 20% of the time you wish it was something else, and then the rest of the time you sort of wish you had 100 foot. So I figured 50s were good. And so this stuff sort of came together to be our grip and lighting package for this project, and it totaled us $625 for a rental. And that was to pick up Friday, return Monday. So yeah, I think it's technically a 1-day rental since we picked it up Friday evening. They call the weekend a 1-day, usually bring it back Monday afternoon. So it was a 1-day rental, $625. We get to shoot for 2 days on it, 2.5 days if you count Monday morning. So not that bad. But yeah, $600, not cheap, but you can do some pretty crazy stuff if you have all of these things. So it's not a bad deal. I mean, if you strike the M18, you're cutting, $350 and buying yourself a lot of budget room. but you're losing a lot of that punch. So any questions on gear, rentals, why I picked things, why I didn't pick things, anything like that that I can clarify? I'm going to take a sip while I wait for the comments to catch up. That must sound awesome. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions about rentals. So that was our rental package for this thing. And if we don't have any questions, I guess we'll move on. But that's the gear. Do. Close all that. Come back over here. So I fly into LAX. I forget what time I got in. I want to say that it's like 2 p.m. And 2 p.m. and we met up there. I had to wait. My check bag looked like it got lost by Southwest, but it showed up like an hour late finally. What do you usually use the M18 for? Pushing through windows. The M18 is great for anything that you just need a lot of punch. For this, we pretty much just used it for pushing through windows. I mean, by that I mean we only used it for pushing through windows, which I'll get into in the actual setup. But yeah, it's great for like competing with daylight, basically. So flew into LAX, got my check bag. We met up together, picked up the rental car, went and got in and out, drove to the rental place, picked up the gear, drove to our like Airbnb type thing, which was about 2 hours south of LA, and got into there after dark, and sort of loaded our stuff in and took a quick look around because the first thing on the agenda for the next day was the interview. And so we sort of wanted to make a plan sooner rather than later. So I'm going to pull up my BTS pics. And so I didn't take any that night, I guess, because me and Steven were just looking. So I can't really go through night pictures for you. But you'll sort of see more or less what we were looking at. So this is what our main living room looked like. Switch this back over. Excuse me. Do you pay extra for burn time on the M18s? We do not pay extra for burn time. I assume you mean like hours elapsed on the fixture. I'm not aware of being charged for that ever. And it is daylight. It's an HMI. M18 is an 1800 watt. 1800 watt. I'm too tired. I'm blanking. It's a really bright HMI. So this was our living room with all the stuff still loaded into it from the night before. And this is sort of how it was set up. There's another window just like this one on the other side of the TV. And then this is just a big wall with a little couch. And then off to the right, there's a kitchen. I should just pull all these up so that I can sort of slideshow through them. Bow. Guys, I'm a professional live streamer apparently, but I just don't know how to work my computer. Oh, that's interesting. I guess that sort of makes sense, but I've never heard of that. Okay. Why are these out of order? Stupid Finder pile of garbage. And why are they not all in here? Oh, I hate when Finder does this and it like splits into two windows for some reason. There we go. Okay. So this is what the room looked like. And so we had this chair over here, TV, window, blank wall on this side. Front door is like just to the right of this couch over here, right behind this wall that's obstructing us. And then the kitchen's right over behind that. And so this is sort of standing right around where this little, like in this space right here next to the flag in the middle, looking back towards this door. And so that's the edge of the door frame from the last picture. And then this is sort of the kitchen area. And the rest of it's just bedrooms. So it wasn't a huge place. So we had to sort of figure out what we were going to do for our interview the next morning. And my two thoughts were either we shoot this way into sort of this white kitchen stuff, but maybe pull some of the appliances out to make it look more just like white generic, or we shoot this way. And I liked this way more. And so we went with this way. But so this was we decided this was the best direction for us to shoot an interview. And it was good because we had decently shaped light. So we had good backlight, good frontal light. But it wasn't flat lighting. There was no big light source sort of coming from where camera would be. And so we could sort of augment existing light and not have to fight the sun ever. We also looked, and the sun was going to come up from this frame left side of the house right over the top and come over to the right. So we knew that our morning interview, we shouldn't have too much changing sunlight. And so we liked this spot. I decided that for the sake of space, it made the most sense to, if you look over here, to sort of put audio and our interviewer right where this table was, and then be able to have the subject frame right, looking this way. And so that was sort of the decision. And I just sort of like the natural light, like the depth. I always like shooting into depth, and so pulling him off the background and having windows and stuff in the background helps give us depth cues. We knew that we wanted to sort of art direct this a little bit to make it look better than it did, specifically a little homier, I think, and a little less like a staged place. So that was the decision. My biggest qualms were that we didn't really have much going on outside this window because it's a big white fence, which is why it's all just clipped white out here, is because there's a fence right there. And then there wasn't really a lot of light actually pushing in, and so I knew we would have to augment that a lot. Excuse me. So next morning we get up, we had sort of decided. I start looking at what we're doing and start setting up sort of what I was thinking of lighting wise. And so for me, this is on the morning. What I'm looking at here, I should pull this in to Photoshop real quick so I can sort of actually show you what I'm thinking instead of just visualizing it and pointing at the screen. Here we go. Blango. That's close enough. That's super low res. Never mind. Really quick. Photoshop. Okay. So let's bring out my handy dandy thing that I'm not very good at, which is my tablet, which I will probably ditch quickly enough. And we will illustrate for now in red because red is the color of the kings. Okay. So let me see if this is working. Looks like it's working. It went back to crossing both my screens. Okay. And here we go. Brush size. There we go. Okay, so we have a couple natural light sources. This is obviously a light source. This is a light source. And then we have our other window over here. And so if we have our subject right in here, we're going to get some nice shape on this side of our subject's face as well as on the back of our subject. Now, the trick is figuring out what that actually looks like on the day. And so I do have a frame from, let me figure out what I called it. Okay, so this is what the frame looks like on the day, with just our director sitting in. And this is just a 709 grab. And so we sort of have what I was talking about. This is exposed for the windows more than anything, I guess, or exposed for what our final exposure was. And so we have, I don't want that. I want a new layer. I should do Photoshop tutorials later. Will live broadcast be left up after? I think maybe. I don't know. Depends on if I say anything that I hate or not. Now is definitely the best time to watch it because you might have questions. And if you have any questions, hit me with them. Why is this not painting? Guys, I've forgotten how to work Photoshop, apparently. Why is it really, though? I'm sort of confused right now. Why is it not? It's like painting invisibly. It's painting in white. Oh, history brush? Where's just the regular brush? There's the problem. Okay, I fixed it. Sorry, guys. Dang, history brush. New layer. So, we have that natural shape on this side of his face that I was talking about. which is sort of what I would normally be looking for, because I really like that sort of far side key for giving us some shape. It's a little too far sidey for me here, and obviously we're not really getting enough light out of it. Now, what you can't see here because of the timing of this frame is the sort of natural spill we were getting from the other window. So this is jumping ahead a little. But if you look, this is with that farthest left window open as well. We were getting a bit of fill back on this side too. And basically, if you watch Lighting 101 or 102 on Patreon, we talk about softness of source and stuff. And we're getting relatively soft sources, but slightly hard sources coming from behind him on his right and behind him on his left. And so they're showing up on camera as the edges of his right and the edges of his left. So this is sort of where most of our light's hitting. And some of that light is bouncing off the wall behind him and off everything else, and it's returning, and it's giving us this other sort of fill area, which is right in here. Layer's gone. There we go. And so this is sort of where all that ambient bounce is hitting. And so if we were to make a really quick, really sketchy heat map of our look, it comes down to we have a little bit of this rim here, we have a little bit of a key here, and then we have a lot of fill in the middle in here. And so that's sort of how we ended up playing off the natural light. So what I do is I look at that and I go, okay, we have some natural light coming on this edge, some natural light coming on this edge. We have a little bit of fill here. What I want to do is I want to bring subject up relative to the background. I want to make the background more interesting, because if we go back to this, background super flat. And that's pretty much it. Put some good shape on the subject and make the background spicier. So the way we do this is I decided that we would take this M18, which we have. This is also built on some stuff with references that me and the director had with beams and stuff. So we had sort of talked about some of this. But we decided to put an M18 out here, and that guy was going to just throw us a nice slash right across the background through here, through our frame, and give us some natural hard light. The light walls in the room gave good motivation for everything to be bouncing around and for there to be soft light too. But so we sort of wanted to throw an M18 through the window and just kick these beams, which would give us the ability to spice up the background. And the other thing that did is putting a harder light source over out of the frame on this side, and seeing it playing on the background gave us the opportunity to motivate our actual new key light on Dale's face. So let's go look at what this actually looked like. So this was sort of our finished wide. And as you can see, we sort of had a lot of those original things we talked about, but now we have this slash coming through the background. You can see there's some more art direction and stuff. And we took that sort of existing key direction, which was on this far right side of his face, and we wrapped it around a little more, punched him up a little bit, left the window as it was, sort of left the fill side as it was, and now we have this cool look of him. It's funny how much the haze changed between these shots. But then on the tight, we sort of have the same thing. You can see keys coming from behind him relative to camera on the frame right. We have a little bit of fill highlighting these areas frame left, which is what these highlights are coming from. Excuse me. And then we have just a natural soft bounce coming in, which is coming off the wall behind him. And so that's sort of the idea that I had going into it. This was what I wanted to make, and this is how it worked out. So I can go a little bit more into sort of the other things we did to make this look happen, but that's sort of how we went from, having Steven in the chair and saying, okay, this is sort of what it looks like, and having Dale in the chair and having what we actually wanted it to look like. So, anyone have questions before I continue onward? So one thing I would say regarding lighting stuff like this is I see people ask a lot, basically like, what's your thought process and how do you make stuff look natural and whatever else? And a big part of lighting things to look natural is just that they have to be some form of plausible. They don't have to actually be the way that things are in the scene, but our brain over time picks up a lot of cues of things that it perceives as normal. And so, like, you've seen enough sunrises and sunsets, and you've seen enough rooms with natural light falling into them that you sort of know what's plausible. And you've seen enough movies to see things that aren't necessarily plausible. But so when we see certain things, we go, that wouldn't normally ever look like that. And that starts to make it look weird. And so, for instance, this place, I knew that I could get away with throwing this slash back here because it would be feasible for there to be some direct sunlight coming through that window, because why wouldn't there be? And so we sort of had to play with the angle of it a little bit. And in a perfect world, I honestly would have loved to warm it up a little bit, but we didn't get any gels, which was a short sighting on my part, because I didn't think of it until we were on location, because I normally have my gel roll, but since I flew and didn't bring that stuff, didn't have gels. Wish we could have warmed the background light up a little maybe, but it was fine. So this hard light in the background is plausible. The ambient light in the room is plausible because a lot of the times when you get a hard light coming in like this, it's bouncing off all these surfaces and just bouncing light all around and making a big soft source in here. And then this edge light on Dale is plausible because it's coming from an actual window. And so the biggest jump is that this key light isn't necessarily plausible, I would say, because it's very unlikely for that quality of light to be coming from there. It's possible, and it's possible enough that you can believe it and it doesn't feel super lit, to me at least. If you disagree, feel free to tell me. But it's because it's still plausible. We see light coming from the right side of the frame, and so it's like, there's the sun or something over there. It's realistic that there would also be this other light hitting him. So if we look at our original janky heat map of what the natural light was doing, and then we sort of just take it and put it over Dale, we see that it's not that different, because we still have the highlight on this edge, highlight on that edge, fill on this edge. But what's happened is we've brought this edge around a little more to a shape that's a little more pleasing. And then the fill's sort of been played with to taste. And a lot of the times I find that something people don't account for enough is they get all busy with figuring out their key light and like making a really cool key, and they don't do a good enough job managing this fill ratio. And so stuff just like they just let this side clip off or be really flat. And the fill side's the tricky side because key you can pretty much just like set and you know when it looks good. But a fill, to me, you have to really walk in that perfect level of there's just a little bit of information there. It's not really clipped, and it's not really too hot. It's right in this magic spot. What did you use for your key light and fill? We're going to go into that in just a second. So that was sort of the idea. So the way we went about doing that is... here we go. Dang it. Is this. So we took our two quasars and put them right in front of the door, which is right on this corner here. And we walked those in pretty close to the edge of frame. I left the grids on them because I didn't want them spilling all over. And basically, the thing with the quasars in this situation to me is that they are soft enough to be relatively flattering. You know, it's not like just a tiny beam making really hard shadows. They're soft enough to be flattering, but they're hard enough to be dramatic, and they're hard enough to play with that background light, with the way we made the M18 back there. And so that's why I didn't super like diffuse the quasars or anything, because I didn't necessarily want super soft light, because I knew the interview was also going to have some conflict of like happy parts, sad parts, difficult and scary parts, and so it's hard to sort of make a look that'll fit all those things sometimes. And I feel like playing that key quality to be in that middle where it's not too soft, not too hard, gives us the flexibility. Now the thing is, if we didn't have any fill in there and it was just this key, it would have been super dramatic. But the way that we stop it from being too dramatic is we bring in just that tiny bit of super soft fill, bring up his shadow side, and that sort of brings everything into line. Why do you have Talent looking so far off camera? Talent wasn't always looking that far off camera, because as you can see here, I'm pointing at my screen. As you can see here, the red camera was set to a slightly more standard interview framing, closer to the interviewer, and it was just slow dollying on the second shooter. Excuse me. Which was cool. I don't really like into camera interviews personally. I mean, I guess they can be fine, but I really like coming off axis more. And so there were times that, like, when we were giving more normal answers on the easy rig, I'll float back on axis and come back to sort of around where the red is, and I would actually shoot from behind and above the red a little bit. And then when things get more dramatic and more intimate, I would come off axis and come in, and that would bring us to this dramatic shadow side, and it would bring us in really close to Dale, who was our interviewee, and we would get to have these cool little emotional moments there where it's just like us and him, and the rest of the room is all compressed right out. So it's a personal taste thing. I like eyeline being a little further off. Some people like having it almost into camera. I think you either should, like, I don't know. I'm fine with doing this, but I tend to definitely skew more towards off. Key light and fill. Key light is these two quasar kinos, and the fill is the wall, basically. So the M18 is outside on its combo stand, just blasting some light into the room. I tried to airdrop myself a bunch of pictures. I don't know if they made it through or not. I might have to re-airdrop them if not. I don't see them. Yeah, I'm going to re-airdrop myself some stuff real quick so I can show you guys some things. But the M18 was outside and the quasars were inside. And that was sort of... And so here's sort of an example, too, of, like... this is still pretty off axis, but these were these cool, like, when I could come in close and be just really sort of intimate. It says waiting. Why is it waiting? IMAX send. There we go. So that gave us the opportunity to do that. So the thing I'm going to have to do real quick, because I'm not sure off the top of my head, there are technically two slightly different setups here because we did two interviews. So this setup is slightly different than this one. They're almost the same, but there are a few little tweaks, which I can go over. Foolcat. I unfortunately didn't check this ahead of time. Foolcat's a cool little piece of software that'll spit you out metadata on your stuff. So let's see. Dale Black, Amira. Let's go with card 1. Select. And so basically what's cool about this is you can give it a card like this. And Dale Black 1. And you can hit create catalog and it'll quickly go through your footage, whether it's red footage or RE footage or a lot of other footage. And it'll go through and it'll read all the metadata for you. And it should, let's see, here we go. It should make us a little PDF here that shows all the footage, like beginning, middle, and end frames of all the shots, as well as all the metadata for it. And so it's a really cool way to, like, once you dump all your cards at the end of the day, if you want to make things easy for your editor, you can actually go back through, print one of these off, or just, like, screenshot it. And you have all this information on all your cards. Make sure you don't miss anything. So let's see. So this is our setup with Dale. We were shooting Apple ProRes 422 HQ, 3.2K in camera, 23.98 frames per second. Ari Amira. Here's my Amira screen number. 180 degree shutter angle. ISO 800, white balance 5600 Kelvin, tint 0, log C, and a 4-stop ND filter. No flag or negative fill on this one. So camera's set to 5600. Our M18 is at about 5600. And the one thing that I did do is, I believe if you look back at the behind the scenes picture, you will see that one of the kinos of the 6 is daylight balanced, or is tungsten balanced rather. And the rest of them are all, they're all daylight balanced. So let's see. Boop-a-doop-a-doo. Should be about right. So yeah, so these 4 were switches, and so we put 1 on tungsten, the rest on daylight, just to come ever so slightly warmer, just to help bring his skin tone out a little bit. And then these ones I think are both right around 5600 too. These ones were crossfade, so we had a little more flexibility, but I'm pretty sure that's what we were at. So yeah, so let me see if those airdrop things came through. Yay. This is going to be a mess a little bit, but go back. So this is what the M18 looked like outside the house. Just sitting on a combo, up right about that high. We threw, I believe, a double scrim in there just to take it down a few stops, because it was just a little too hot originally. Then this is what our setup looked like with Phil standing in the chair. We had Phil come out, and he sort of PA'd and gripped and was generally super helpful. So we did have one other set of hands. And then you can see where the quasars are, and so they're walked at about a 45-degree angle to give us this edge right around where his right eye is. And then we turned off all the practicals. And for the first setup, we had a little bit of tungsten fill. I think it was tungsten. It might have been like 4300 from one of Phil's ICANN light. So another thing we did, if we go back over to that scout picture, is we had this white fence that I was really annoyed by. And so the subject's wife and daughter were there, and they do some like home staging and stuff. So they brought some extra art department-y things for us. So we rearranged the room a little. We scooched the couch over. We took this off the wall and put something else up there. We put like a little plant in here, I think, put some pictures over here, but this wall was driving me crazy because I was like, I don't really want to close the blind because I like the depth, but I don't want it to just be white clipped garbage. And so what we did is we took a little plant and we took a Cardellini clamp, and we clamped a plant outside the window. And it was really funny to me because we took all this grip gear to make a little window plant. But that's what you're seeing in the background here. And so it just stopped our background from quite clipping out. It looked plausible enough, I guess. So sometimes you got to get a little ingenious in how you go about doing something like that. But we ended up just making a background plant and getting it to where we needed it to be using a clamp and a C-stand. That's why you bring 5 C-stands, people. So that was sort of the plan there. Punched up all the quasars on that side because we needed the output of all of them at full blast to sort of sit him there in the exposure. Since we were punching so high with daylight and the M18 and everything. Excuse me. That being said, it's pretty impressive that with that much ND in, these quasars are still punching that hot. So yeah, so we art directed this. You can see there's a plant here now. There's some books over here. We took the TV off the wall and put a canvas that was elsewhere in the house up on this side just to help break up the wall. We put a picture back here. We took a plant that was somewhere else and we scooched it right up to this side of the window intentionally because I wanted it to sort of have a shadow falling here and to break up some of what was going on this side. And so we just sort of used the plant to naturally break up light, give us some interest. We put some pillows on the couch to break it up. And so it's a really simple lighting setup. It's just a key light I controlled the amount of fill by using the blinds that I would close that, or not the fill, but the rim by closing the blinds a bit or opening the blinds until I got it where I wanted it. And then I closed that big blind on the right about halfway so that we had this top line in here to define sort of some of that. And so at this point, what we had going on is we have a M18 outside the window, and it is punching all of our light that's coming across this way. So we have this beam that's coming sort of from here to here. And if that were too hot, it would match the outside, but it would just be too hot in the exposure, so that's why we brought it down a little. We showed up pretty blind. The only thing we saw was pictures online, and it seemed decent. So, I mean, I guess that's sort of a scout, but yeah, we just saw pictures online, and we're like, yeah, it looks good. So we have the M18 throwing this way, this directionality. It's a great arrow. Doesn't look like anything. So we have this streak coming off. We're breaking it up to create some contrast by using these plants and stuff. And so we're sort of doing it. I think this is something that Patrick over in the Wandering DP has talked about. But you're sort of creating these layers of like bright, bright, and then in here there's a little bright, and then right here there's a little bright. And so there's these couple layers of bright stuff, and then we're interspersing them with dark stuff to help make visual interest. And so it's darker here, it's a little darker here, it's a little darker here. In here, there's sort of some broken up darkness. And then there's darkness in here and in here. And so we're sort of just going through, and we're creating these layers of dark and light and dark and light and dark and light and dark and light, and putting our subject and his light part in front of some of this and just breaking him off the background a little bit. And that's sort of the visual interest key to it, is just managing those contrast ratios and whatnot. The other benefit of the quasars the way they are is that we're getting a cool little catch light in his eye right here. And if we go back to the tight, we will see that even more distinctly. Like here. Look at that dang eye sparkle. It's pretty. So, that was how we lit the interview. One thing that I did as an exercise, because I figured I might need it for something like this, is at the end, we just really quickly had our director sit in again. So this is no lights on, no one in the chair. No lights on, someone in the chair. The M18 on, so that's exactly what the M18 is doing. Is it's just giving us that breakup in the background. You can sort of see on this side where it is throwing that edge, and in here it's breaking it up. And so the M18 is giving us that. Then from there, we're opening that window. So at this point, the far left window is closed. I open it up a little to give us some of this little natural rim, because we didn't have a fill light for this setup. So this was our only way to control fill and rim, was sort of this window. So open the window, and we bring up that side just a little bit into our exposure. And then we pump the quasars on. And that's sort of our key light right there. And that's the setup. And so that's not as well composed a frame, because it was just a real quick thing we threw on at the end of the day and whatever. But that is the exact same light that Dale is sitting in this. And so that's exactly what it looked like. Throw a little extra haze in there, and that's what you get. So it's super simple, but that was our setup. And art direction goes a long way in helping with things like that. So anyone have other questions about that setup? I'm trying to see if there's anything else interesting in here. Oh, one other thing worth noting, let me see if I have it in here real quick, is that I feel like I get asked a lot of the time about like operating Easy Rig stuff. This isn't a great behind the scenes video. I'll turn the audio off. But this is during the interview. So we have the Scarlett sort of second shooting its way around here. And then I'm over on the Amira, and sort of just like assessing when in the interview is a good time to be focused where, and when I can get away with moves and stuff. And just constantly giving myself a little sway and a little bit of float. Set is hazed, yes. There's a DF50 on the floor back over here. But yeah, so it's a pretty chill operating. And so the rough thing was this interview ended up taking about 3.5 hours. There were a few short breaks in there, for like water and stuff, but for the most part, I was easy rigging for about 3.5 hours. Upside is this is the place we slept, so I woke up in my shorts and t-shirt, got right to lighting the place, and right to shooting in it, and then when we were done, I sort of sat back down in bed for a minute and sat on my phone, so it's really nice. But that's sort of what the operating looks like for me. It's pretty chill, and you have to be really sneaky about moving your hands sometimes. And I do operate like this a lot as well. Left hand's on the follow focus. Right hand is right on the butt of the camera up by the batteries. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I did get pretty close sometimes, which you can sort of see a little more in this frame. But you sort of got to feel it out and wait till they're... At a certain point, they sort of just totally forget about you. And that's when you can sort of pounce in and get in the way a little more, and they won't be bothered by it. So the one quick bonus setup that I'll talk about from this shoot, unless anyone has other questions, if you have any questions, hit me with them. The one other thing that I will briefly talk about is just this setup, which was Dale sort of going through old pictures. And this all makes more sense if you know the story, but basically he was in a plane crash 50 years ago, and so he was going through newspaper clippings and stuff from the accident. And so this is some of what we shot out there. Oh, I was somewhere around a 2 to a 2.8 on a 50 millimeter for all of that Easy Rig stuff in the interview, for anyone who's interested. That was on my Contax 50. So for this stuff, we came outside. We're under this like overhang back porch thing. Let me see. I'm pretty sure I have a BTS picture. Oh, unless I don't. I thought I grabbed it. Let me check really quickly and see if I have it in here, because it would be worth looking at. Too far. It would be right in here. No questions? Nobody? That's it for questions for now. I can't be that good at explaining all of this. You have to know why I did something or why I didn't do something, or some question about numbers, or how I suck at what I do, and all that kind of stuff. Gotta get one of those. Nobody? Okay. It would be right before the plane stuff. Waiting on that outdoor setup. Yeah, sorry. I'm working on it. Maybe it's a phone picture. Maybe that's why I'm not seeing it here. Let me look real quick. See, I thought I had all this stuff organized, but then that airdrop didn't work like I thought it did. Yes. Okay. So outdoor setup. He's going through all his pictures and stuff. And we had to move quickly on this because it was before we had to go fly with him. And so the trick is, really quickly, director calls and says, hey, we're going to have him go through this stuff. What do you want to do? And I basically said, okay, well, let's throw him here. We're going to shoot out into the stuff because we want depth. And so I don't want to shoot into this dumb wall. Let's shoot into something that has color and depth to it. And so we're getting a tiny bit of natural light just bouncing off everything and coming in here on him. Excuse me, which looks good, but it's really dark. And so what I did is I told Phil real quick, I go, hey, can we throw the 8x Ultra Bounce against this wall? And we'll just punch the M18 into it and give us some natural bounce fill from the other side, almost as if, sort of motivated in my mind, as if there's something over there and the sun's hitting it and bouncing back, which is a plausible thing, whether it's a wall or a car or a tree, or it could be anything. And so this was our whole setup. We did talk about this a little before we actually did it, and so I sort of had this plan on standby. It wasn't like the minute we got out there, and so I told Phil, I believe before lunch, that this was sort of what I was going to want to do when we came out here. So he had already built the 8x and whatnot, or 6x. So we have just a 6x Ultra Bounce creating a soft source because we don't want a really hard M18 hitting him. And we creeped it partially out because it was originally all the way under here, and the M18 was hitting all of it, and it was just too much. And so we walked it around a little bit so it felt a little more natural to me. And then we panned the M18 on, so the M18's only just sort of barely kissing the side of it and kicking back into here. And so that just picks up that inside edge just enough. Let's go back to this. I should just open a few Finder windows, right? That would make too much sense. And so that's what's giving us this light that's all sort of picking up this side of his face and just stopping it from being too gloomy. It also looked really cool on his hands. Let me see really quickly if I can pull up an example of that. But it looked really cool on his hands when he was going through it all. When did we do that? Sorry, guys. Oh, here we go. So here's the stereotypical shot where you can see the setup at the beginning. So I was just trying to frame that M18 out, because you can see it's right over there. So we'd frame the M18 out, and I would take a step to the right. And we had this relatively natural key fill situation. Yeah, let's try going to that point or so. And then the mic was getting stuffed in the shot. But that was sort of the light. Let me see if I can find one of the like tights, because there were some cool tights like of his hands and stuff. Going through pictures. I think they were on another card that I might not have in here. But so yeah, this was sort of the look, and it's just a game of make the light look decent. So we have the Ultra Bounce giving us some fill on this side. Lens, this is also the 50mm Contax, I believe, right around a 2. It might have been a little closer to a 4 on this, but I think it's right around a 2, or a 1.4, I should say. How do you balance your priorities as a DP with the director's priorities? On a project like this, honestly, it's not that bad because nothing that I'm doing takes a whole ton of time. And so the director and I talked a lot about like references. Talent is loved as well as boomed. Talent was actually double loved most of the time. They would put a hard recorder on them, like a Zoom 1 or something like that. A wireless lav to the recorder, and then a boom. But let me see real quick if I have it in my Dropbox still. So the director was awesome. Stephen Gray, he's killer. But so he took the time to make this Dropbox thing of references. And we had all these different aspects of the documentary, and he pulled stuff that he liked for just about like every part of it. Let me see, and so like he had all these references that sort of gave me a good sense of the feel that he was looking for. And it was really a feel that I really dig. It was funny. Some of the reference frames were mine, which is always flattering. But so we had all these images, and these images sort of, we even had a few GIFs in here. But I sent some of these to him. He posted some of them on his own. But we sort of had these references for how we wanted things to feel. And knowing how we wanted things to feel, there was never really this fight of where like he didn't like the way something looked. Excuse me. And since we weren't, nothing I was doing was taking super long. Excuse me. There wasn't really ever a conflict. It's just trying to make it look good. So these are some of the references that we were going through. You know, we talked about beams and stuff like that. We talked about beams again. And we talked about darkness, and we talked about, you know, obscured parts of people and stuff. And so we sort of had all these references, which was also part of why he was like gutsy enough to trust me to not have a director's monitor or anything. He'd just let me shoot. And so thankfully, when you work with directors who are on the same page, you don't really get micromanaged. But yeah, so that's sort of about all I have to say about that. It's just asking him, hey, what do we need? Thankfully, it was really collaborative, too, where he had some insight into the visuals. I had some insights into the story and what we needed sequence-wise. So we sort of ping-ponged off each other on that stuff. But that's how we lit all this stuff, just really simply with a bounce with an M18 punched into it. And this is where the M18 becomes important. Is like if we didn't have an M18, this would have been a much trickier setup to light nearly as quickly, because it's like, we can try to like walk the quasars in really tight, or we can try to spin him around and then hit him with real bounce daylight. But the M18 just gives us a whole lot of flexibility, which we wouldn't have otherwise. Excuse me. So I'm not necessarily gonna jump into the whole rest of this shoot. I figured I mainly just wanted to talk about that setup. So if anyone has any other questions about that setup, let me know, and I will go over them before we proceed to the next setup. I was trying to look real quick, see if I had a good example of... Let's see this. Of what this actually looks like in motion. So this is unedited, ungraded, 709 straight out of camera sort of stuff. But this is sort of the feel of some of it. And so you just sort of got to be sensitive to that emotion and where you should be when and how the camera should be moving based on what they're saying. And some of this stuff is obviously either going to get cut out, whether it's because I know that, we're going to have B-roll over this part or whatever else it may be. But the green tint you were talking about, yeah, it's not too bad. I mean, this footage is a little green. I don't generally get self-conscious about it because I generally know if it's too much or not. So, like, I don't think this stuff is too much. I mean, it's a 50, so it's not quite as smooth as, like, a 35 might be. But it's not too... I don't think it's too shaky. I don't know. It's not like the sports stuff that I shoot or something. And it was another thing that the director and I were on the same page about, with sort of letting that play. And being able to have that flexibility, because this is something like you can do this kind of stuff handheld that you can't do, with a lot of other setups. That's like he's talking and you whip down to the hands and you come back up to the face, and you can't really do that if you're not handheld. And I just think that handheld makes it it gets greener when it's paused. I don't know if anyone else can see that. Sorry, Philippe's talking about an unrelated thing. It's like magenta when it's playing green when it's paused. But the scene is generally more green than not. I wasn't sure if that's what you're talking about. But yeah, so we have the flexibility to sort of walk between all these things, and when it gets cut up, it doesn't really feel nearly as interviewee as just like a lock-off does. So I can show you real quick to what the like safety angle looks like. I haven't actually looked at this yet, so hopefully it looks okay. Yeah, it's weird. Someone said it's a graphics card issue. So this is sort of what the safe interview shot looked like. So this was just the second shooter with the red. I believe we had a 35 millimeter on it. And this is straight out of camera 2. Of course, red footage. And so this is sort of what our safe interview angle looked like. It's fine. Nothing crazy. So, that's enough of that setup. Now that I've talked about this setup for like an hour and a half. If anyone else has questions, hit me with them though. But I think I should stop rambling. So, we'll go to setup 2. The other setups I think are simpler. But hopefully that was helpful to somebody. Let me really quickly make sure that there's nothing else interesting for my phone I missed. Shooting compressed. The Amira doesn't do RAW. It's all ProRes. So it's ProRes 422HQ, which isn't like usually we'll shoot quad 4 for like important stuff, but since we knew we were going to be burning cards on this, we did HQ. Pretty contrasty compared to the Amira. Well, the Amira, yeah, I mean the 709s are a little different, but I mean you're also talking about different points in the interview where like the haze levels are probably different and stuff. Because if you were to go into, I don't know where these things are hiding, to be honest, to really truly tell you off the top of my head. But yeah, like if you were to go into this, it also sort of has to do a little bit with how it's playing position-wise. This part of this one looks soft. So we switched it to a tighter setup for when we did our short interview. But the Amira, so this is like graded to some degree. Great face, Dale. If we turn off the 709 LUT, this is what log C on the Amira looks like straight out of camera. Little 709. Whoopsie. And then log C. So log C is super flat. Red log film's the same way though. I don't think clients are ever anti-handheld unless you're like corporate clients who really don't like it. It has to fit the piece, you know. If you're shooting like a super clean corporate-y thing, I wouldn't go super edgy handheld. But like for a doc about a guy who died in a plane crash, I don't think anyone's gonna get thrown by it. Okay, next setup. I don't know I feel like the real question is like, how do you convince your clients to get into handheld? The answer is I don't know, because it depends on your clients. I don't think there's anything else super interesting in here. Okay. Yeah, wall plant. Let me see. I think this might really quickly just show you the relative positions of everything. So here's our M18, our door into the house, our slash of light coming across, our set decorated room. For the second time we did the setup, I did throw a little diffusion on just because I was trying to imitate. I spun the quasars around. I'm not going to talk about this because it's not profitable. It would take too much time. But I did some little tweaks with the way the quasars were for the second interview, which was partially because we lost our fill. And so I added a little fill going off the ceiling and diffused quayside. It was also early in the morning, so our outdoor exposure was lower. But yeah, that was sort of how that worked. So we'll go to the second thing we did. So the catch with the second thing, so we wrap our shoot, go fly to San Francisco, get out our location, go to a scout. And the unfortunate thing about this shoot is that I do not have any of the footage. So I got sent a few log C grabs and really quickly threw a LUT on them. Excuse me. So please don't judge this footage too hard. It's more just to get a sense of the setup. But this is definitely not final looks or anything. So here's our wide, 1 tight, 2 tight. She wasn't reading a book the whole time, which is also part of why this isn't a great grab. But that was sort of we had to do a 3-camera, 2-person interview, wide, tight, tight. And the way we had to go about doing it was we came to the space. It's like a co-working facility, where people like go and be creative and work together. Excuse me. And so this was the space we walked into. Production had it rented out for the day of the shoot, but we went and looked at it the day before. This is what it looked like naturally. So this is one angle. This is another spot we looked at. This is another spot we looked at. Worth noting that this shelf over frame left right here, the other spot is the exact opposite of that. So we're sort of looking back into that direction. And then there's this. And so we were sort of looking and going around and saying, where do we put these people and which direction do we shoot and everything. And our initial inclination was to be over here shooting left. I don't know why I didn't take a picture of that setup very well. I might have, but I might have forgot to copy it. But anyway, so we originally talked about going over here, decided it was a little cramped. And so my second choice personally was to shoot this way, because I really liked the depth and everything. But director and client weren't into the like cafe feel of having the background like that, which I totally get. So we didn't do that. So then choice number 3 was to go this way, and sort of shoot into all this stuff. And that was what we landed on. So we walked around, talked through angles, said, okay, if they're here and here, where's the wide, where are the tights? Where's the wide, where are the tights? What's the background on each of the tights? And so we had to sort of play this game of like, we want a good master of our 2-shot of both of them, but we want the tights to have interesting backgrounds too. We don't want anything to be super flat. And how are we going to light it? And so we decided to shoot this way because it gave us a lot of space once we moved these tables out. And we felt pretty good about the background, but the space was sort of a compromise of like most space and best background together, So this is the direction we decided to shoot. So also in the scout, I talked to, we had a gaffer and a key grip and we had one other grip there on the shoot day. So we had 3 guys. And so gaffer and key grip came on the scout and we sort of talked through the plan. And we had talked ahead of time too in pre-production sort of about what we wanted the look to be. So I'd pulled some references, and we decided, double far side cross keys. And so basically that's exactly what it looks like if we go and quickly look at this again. So we have 2 far side keys, giving some shape to our subjects. And yeah, so we did exactly that. We talked, the other concern though was, well, we don't want lights and stands in our wide or in our tights if we can avoid it. And so we had to figure that out. So we sort of went through a few conversations with our gaffer and key grip about, well, we could try and put HMIs over, in here, but they might end up in the tights, or, what are we going to do? And basically what we decided the best compromise was if we bounced everything and we rigged the bounces to the ceiling. So that's exactly what we planned on doing. So our gaffer brought his awesome big grip truck full of goodies and HMIs. This guy's awesome, Eric Bloom. Highly recommend him in San Francisco. He's killer to work with. Super kind guy. And so him and his guys got right to work. The nice thing about being on a set like this is that, the Dale shoot, it was sort of all hands on deck where I'm, moving my own lights and stuff. This shoot, I really just get to stand around and shot call and look at monitors. You're not really moving much of anything yourself necessarily. Sorry, I'm a little dried out. So this was sort of when we started roughing in the setup. So a big factor again is art direction. We decided, okay, we're going to want to shoot this way, but what are we going to do with chairs? What are we going to do with background? And so me and the director were sort of pretty heavily involved in that because there wasn't really a dedicated art director. So that was something that we were figuring out. So as we're figuring that out, other guys are getting cameras built and on dollies, and the Grip and Electric team are getting lights up. So the decision was to first just eyeball stuff and make sure that we like the look. So they threw these 4x8 foot white show card poster board, something sort of deals, I don't know exactly what they were, up on stands so we could just see how the bounce was going to look. And then they took two, I believe, 1200 HMIs from right over in front of everybody, punched them into the cards, turns a hard source into a soft source because it's now a 4x8 foot source up in here. And it falls right back on everyone, creates a nice soft light. And we sort of played with, okay, how far is too frontal? How far is too sidey? How are we? The nice thing is they're also sort of creating each other's rim lights naturally. And so we sort of eyeballed them with that. And then once we had positions, the key grip went and rigged them up into the ceiling, which was pretty simple. Honestly, it was mostly like clamps and string, actually. It wasn't a lot of like hard rigging since they aren't super heavy. And there were plenty of pipes and stuff to run onto. So HMIs pumped into two big sources here. Now, the natural problem you can see right away is that the light is sort of spilling all around everywhere, and so everything sort of had to get flagged in after that. These two solids that you see here are to stop the light from spilling directly onto Talent, so we don't have hard light from the camera side hitting them at all. So it's blocking it from hitting Talent, but it's still hitting the boards. So since it's hitting the boards, we're getting soft light, no hard light camera side. And then there's some black wrap and stuff to help control a little bit of the spill. So does that make sense? Anyone have questions so far? So that was sort of our main light for these guys. Here's another angle from the other side of things. You can see our big HMIs. We ended up putting a silk in here and just putting a little like 200 or 400 HMI into it just to bring the fill up a little bit and bring that inside level up. But yeah, these guys are coming off here. Ran a piece of Duvetine between these to kill some of the spill that was going across the middle. And then we looked at framing to see how much room we had, and Jeff, our key grip, looked at it and was like, we should just skirt the whole thing. Oh, and they put a blackboard up on here to stop it reflecting too hard off the like ventilation duct here. So blackboarded off the duct, whiteboarded ourselves two keys, gives us nice soft light in here, plenty of output from the 1200s. Here you can see from behind Talent, so you can see middle two-shot camera, tight number 2. Technically, this was A, this was B, and this was C. So we have our 2-shot and our 2 tight shots. Booms coming in from way off over here. And then as you can see, these guys are sort of just stopping any of these HMIs from spilling in on Talent. And then this is our sort of fill source in here, which we sort of just had to build into the middle of this because we didn't want to spill into other cameras' shots. How much time do you usually have to experiment with lighting? So timing-wise on this day, doors open to the location at 7, and we had to have everything set by 10 and like pretty much locked in. Talent walked in at 10:15, I believe. And then we had like 5-10 minutes to make any final tweaks and then we had to roll, and couldn't change anything once we started rolling. So we had 3 hours, I guess, which is a decent amount of time, but it's a single setup. Other things have different amounts of time. I think Dale's interview we set up in an hour, maybe an hour and a half, all told, with like camera and lighting and everything. But this one, we had 3 hours, but that includes getting in. We had to lay down stuff on the floor to stop from scratching everything up, build all the dollies, build all the cameras, match all the camera settings, get all the lights up, run everything into a multi-viewer, run director's monitors. And so for not having a ton of people, because it was me, Gaffer, Key Grip, 2 camera operators who are also sort of being ACs, director, producer, sound guy. We didn't have any PAs or anything, so it wasn't really a huge crew. But that was sort of how it played. So this is sort of the reverse, where you can see cameras, see how the lights, where the light's coming from. Pretty simple. And then once we had our key light falling how we liked it, and we had a decent fill, and we started to play with the shape, we just started to throw accent lights around to help break up stuff on the background and add a little life to stuff. So this is, I want to say it's like a Joker 400 or 800, and just throwing a slash, which I believe is hitting the couch. If you look at the couch frame, I think this guy's coming from that Joker, and so I was like, what if we throw something over here? There's a little tungsten, like a 650 or something, over behind the couch, which is just sort of hitting the wall and adding a highlight here. There's another HMI over in this meeting room, just skimming off the table and creating this bounce on the wall to add some interest over here. And so we were just sort of punching stuff around to make some interest in the background, in the wide and the 2 tights. So the one thing that was funny that was a big pain was we had to build all that skirting around everything, because everything was reflecting back over in here. And so when you start getting reflections, you have to kill them by just putting negative everywhere. And so here you can sort of see the extra skirt they built with Duvetine to help just stop any of that from spilling into our background. And so this is sort of how it looked. All the tables and chairs and stuff got moved around. We have 2 big soft sources. This one's keying Bill. This one's keying Cheryl. And then they're each creating a nice hair and rim light on each other as well. And then just a tiny bit of fill, and you're good to go. So it's pretty simple. The thing with something like this is you want soft light from further away. And so that's where you need bigger sources, where like the 4x8 foot looks good, even though it's like 10 feet away, where like a 4-foot quasar might look good if it's a foot away. But if we put the quasar or something else like that, a Kino that far away, it wouldn't be as soft, because as it gets farther, it gets apparently smaller and becomes a harder light. And we need the 1200s to give us enough punch to bounce, whatever this is, like 12, 15 feet, and then bounce back 8 or 10 feet. And still have enough output in there. So it's pretty simple. There was some periodic tweaking here and there, but that was pretty much the setup. You can see we sort of had to black wrap in even more stuff. Hair and makeup came in for final touches, but that's pretty much it. You can sort of see the clamps and stuff that ended up going on in here too, to rig these guys to the ceiling. But it was a really, really straightforward setup. It sort of involves a lot of gear. What would you have done in a smaller room, not so high of ceilings? The other option is you run, like, if you have like a gem ball or a China ball or something, you can put a single source that's actually in between them instead of cross keying them. Otherwise, our other plan was to just put soft boxes like chimeras on the HMIs and just cross key them from behind each other's shoulders, and we were just going to have to try and sort of frame them out. But in the end, it probably would have looked similar, but this gave us a lot more flexibility to move around, play with framing, and not have anything in the shot by sort of rigging it into the ceiling. And we got super soft light, which is always good. This was when we turned the lights off and started tearing down, so you can sort of see, we obviously turned off all the practicals in the house. There were a few, like there was one practical, let me see. I don't think you can see it in any of these. But back over in here, this one actually. This practical was like a safety light, and so it never shut off. And it was just creating all this daylight spill over here, and so we just black wrapped it. so that it wouldn't be going over there. So they killed that light for us, which is another helpful thing to be able to do. Well, thanks, dude. Hopefully it's good. Hopefully it looks good. I'm really interested to see the final edit and cut. Like I said, I just got 3 frames to look at and really quickly leaded them, so I think it looks better than that. I will say, just for the sake of being transparent and helpful with you guys, one of the suboptimal things that happened is you can see here there's like a tungsten background light in here for the tight. And about 5 minutes into us rolling, the bulb blew in that light and it just pops off. And we couldn't really stop or do anything about it. So we just had to go no background light over there for the rest of the interview, which was not my favorite, but you got to do what you got to do. And one other just thing that's worth mentioning. I don't even have the frame for it though. Let me see if it's in here real quick. This is a slightly better example. Sequence from clip. Sorry guys, just trying to make this viewable for 1 second because it'll make it easier for me to explain what I'm gonna explain. Here we go. So one other little pet peeve that I had, which wasn't anyone's fault, but it was just the way that things played during the take versus with our stand-ins, and something you have to be careful about, is that with our stand-ins, I was super happy with all of this. You know, we had our little background light over here, which this is where it died, and so it sort of turned into a darker purpley thing that I wanted it to be, but whatever, it's fine. But the thing that played out slightly differently with her, which I wish I had accounted for better, honestly, is that the way that she tended to sit and the way that she tended to direct her eyeline was just barely creeping between where she wasn't quite getting a great highlight from the key and she wasn't quite getting a great highlight from the fill. Periodically, she would dip one way or the other and it would pick up and it would be perfect. But our stand-ins were looking right at each other the whole time, and so they were always getting really good highlight. But the way they cheated, I sort of wished that I had walked in a little extra highlight. But other than that, I was pretty happy with how it looked. You know, it's that clean, commercially type thing. So I think everyone dug it. So yeah, that was how we did that setup. Pretty straightforward. I guess I might as well. It is funny. I will say that I was sort of going off waveforms and stuff off our attempt to match the C300 Mark II, which was our wide camera in this. And did I not bring the wide into here? I don't know. I don't know what I would add for a catch light. I would maybe just add a little bounce. A little bounce right over his shoulder or head or something. If we could rig it to the ceiling again. Just so there would be some little reflection in here. And it doesn't, it's not the end of the world. And honestly, I think in motion, you won't notice it as much, but it was one of the things that the minute that we started rolling, I was like, she's sitting out of it a lot of the time, you know? But that's the thing too with these sort of things where we had 5 minutes with her in the chair before we had to go. So it wasn't like we could really be like, hey, so you guys have talked for 20 minutes. Can we fiddle with something real quick? You know, we had an hour with them in the room. So anyway, that was that. I don't have the wide here, but the C300, long story short, was a little more underexposed than I thought it was. I think it was fine, but it was the waveforms seemed a little confusing. Because I thought it was all matched up, but then it might just be too that the C300 C-Log curve is a little different than the Amir, and so when you put an Amir 709 LED on it, it looks a little darker than it is. So I think the last setup I'm going to talk about, because this is going late, unless you guys want me to keep talking, is this one. And so this was, we left San Francisco after this interview. So, timeline on this, get in the door at 7 a.m., light until 10 o'clock and set up cameras and everything. Interview rolls from 10:45 to about 11, or no, maybe 10:30 to 11:15 or something. It was about 45 minutes. Talent gets cut and leaves. They had work to do and flights to catch, whatever. Crew breaks for lunch right around 11:30, and then we pack everything up and roll out. So we were out of there by 1:30, I think. So it was a quick shoot. And so we rolled out, brought back rental gear, dumped all the footage, so on and so forth, and flew that night to Chicago. Got in at 3 in the morning, which was awesome. Fell asleep and woke up to go to the studio and do our last shoot, which was a hospital promo commercial thing, basically. So these are more just C-Log grabs that I got sent. This is what it looks like just with RE709 on it. I'm not sure exactly how they did these grabs they sent me, but they seem sort of low res. But who knows? So this was one of our setups. Keep going, sucking up all the knowledge. Well, hopefully it's helpful. If you guys dig it, let me know. I was sort of proud of how I made this look, by the way, to sort of quickly just be glad. For anyone who's curious, there's a dimmed down tungsten 1K over there, which is sort of kicking a little bit of a rim onto the frontal side of my face. There's an Aputure LS1/2 right here behind my laptop, behind my iMac, pumping into the wall, and so that's what's sort of keying me. And then there's a DS1 that's pushed green over there. So it's just sort of a nice little, mixed color tempy sort of thing. Anyway, so for this setup, the plan was to go relatively clean commercially of these various hospital employees on these various backdrops for this commercial. So here's another one. And the way we decided to do that was colored backdrops and then relatively bright, relatively low contrast lighting. So, if anyone has questions, interrupt me at any time. I should just put all these in here. You should change the color DS1 with each setup like Matt Workman. I don't have my app open right now, or I would just wing it over real quick, but I'm too lazy to walk over and change it. Anyway, okay, so this setup, we get to the studio at 9 o'clock in the morning after a solid 5.5 hours of sleep or so. And this is what's set up there. Studio had put up a green screen, and it was just this big studio with all these windows on a second floor in Chicago. So this is what it looked like with sort of crew and AD and AC all in there. And so there's just a lot of sort of like flat blah light going on and some direct sunlight, which creeped away as the morning went on. So initial load-in was like art department getting in, crafty getting in, coffee, camera getting built, whatever else. And then I had to start sort of directing crew. And so I said, okay, we were doing our colored backdrop separately from the green backdrop. So we're going to build our backdrop and start lighting right in front of it. And then we're going to key from the window side just so we're not fighting the window. And that's our plan. So we said, sure. We started putting stuff together. And basically what we have here is a relatively small backdrop put on 2 C-stands, a background light, a rim light, a key light, a bounce for fill, and these 2 negatives sort of controlling some of the spill. Well, thanks, Gavin. Hopefully this is helpful. So the thing with this setup was that we were sort of fighting all of this ambient daylight, because there were so many windows, which like can be helpful sometimes, but when we were trying to shape stuff, there's just like, it's bouncing around everywhere, and it's just like, it's so hard to make contrast or anything in there and stop stuff spilling. And so initially we started setting things up. I was like, this just doesn't look very good. I'm not quite sure why. And the first thing we picked up on was that the green backdrop was subtly enough casting a green cast on all of that bouncing light, and it was making stuff look weird. So we took down the green backdrop, which you can sort of see by here. And then I think we switched backdrop colors or something. Maybe not. I don't know. I feel like initially we were maybe doing a white backdrop or something, and we found out that we couldn't really underexpose it as much as we wanted to because there was just so much bouncing light. And so we're like, we'll go to blue. And that was what we did. So we have 2 sky panels on rolling combo stands with chimeras on them. We have a Kino 2'4" bank, I believe, as a rim light, a Kino 2'4" bank as a background light, and then we have just this 4x bounce as fill. So the thought here for me was going into it that I want to create a pretty soft key and a decent amount of fill, sort of control that fill ratio. And then I want to be able to maybe just add a little bit of a rim on stuff. And so this whole thing is always sort of a process on the day of where you're like, okay, let's try putting, these sky panels over here. And we sort of changed the setup a few times in a few little ways. It's like, I'm not really digging that. Like, what if we flag this off? What if we change the fill over here? And so you're sort of wiggling it. Like, it's not always a first time, like, oh, it's perfect sort of thing, Like, the general idea, I would say, is always the same. But even, say, with Dale's interview that we went over the first time, you're sort of like, okay, I guess this quasar is now going to also be the key because we need the extra output, and let's see if we can get away with not having fill and that kind of stuff. So this setup was definitely one that took some initial wiggling to get done. But thankfully we had some good time to get it done since we were going to live here for a while. So what we ended up doing was we had these two sky panels. This one was sort of a soft, sidey key light. And the reason for that was that I wanted the output, and I wanted it to be as soft as possible, and we didn't really have any like big diffusions or anything, and we didn't really have bright enough lights to punch through big diffusions anyway, so we sort of just took the softbox, got it as close as we could, and that looked good, but it was a little too contrasty and dramatic. And so we walked another sky panel basically right next to the edge of the camera, still on that key side, and had it lower output just to help bring up the whole front side of their face a little bit. And so I wanted the shape of the side light, but didn't want it to be too dramatic. And so we brought in the front a little with a little front light. And so that just brings up this whole area. And so the front light still isn't really hitting this, frame left side of their face too much. And so that's why we have this negative and bounce over here. The negative is to control just a little bit of, I think, there was some daylight just spilling around. But the fill was to push just a little bit more and wrap that edge around a little bit. So this is our frontal, like next to camera sky panel. It's set to 5,000 Kelvin, 30% output, and no plus green or anything. I don't remember what in camera was set to. I want to say that in camera was 56, but it might have not been. It might have been like 52 or something. I don't remember exactly. And then our main key sky panel was 5,000 Kelvin as well. And was set to 70% output. I want to say that maybe camera was at like 52 or 54, so that the sky panels were just a tiny bit warm, but I'm not 100% sure. So for the background light, I was like, I really want to create this gradient, that'll help sort of add some depth to an otherwise flat background. And we do that by adding contrast. So we didn't have a really short stand, and so they took like a Cardellini and just clamped the Kino to an Apple box to get it down low, turned it vertically, and closed the doors a bit so that it would create this nice little gradient. Those are regular Kino tubes. The difference is that Kino tubes aren't dimmable, unfortunately. They just turn on and off, and they're also single color temperature. I would rather have quasars, but we did not have that option. We did not black out the windows. Lights were trying to overpower ambient. But that's where we were having to walk everything in really close because there was so much ambient. So here's sort of from the other side of the backdrop where you can see cameras over here. This is our key for the most part, which is punching pretty hot. But it wasn't quite full output, but that was sort of because we couldn't control our background exposure too much. So we had to sort of just deal with it. So key is punching 70%. We have a slightly further just soft frontal fill at 30%. Then we have this bounce, which ended up coming in a little more so that we would fill in a little more. And we're just sort of making this light sandwich. And so if you think of it from the town's perspective, over on their left, there's a bright light. Over in the middle, there's a slightly less bright light. And on the right, there's a least bright light. So there's light coming from everywhere. And it's all soft because it's all big white sources. You see these diffusion panels. And then the bounce, those are your apparent sources. And so it's soft source, soft source, soft source. But it brings us this light to dark wrap. And it's this subtle, relatively subtle. It's not super high contrast. New Finder window. This is the one that I like the most, I think. And so we have, our main sky panel is probably punching like these highlights, and sort of coming over here. Our frontal sky panel is just taking some of this extra edge that you can see over here, and it's just filling in. It's filling in some of these areas and stuff, so we don't have any real shadows. We just have contours. And so it's filling in all these areas to just give us some contour to things. And then the bounce is filling in this far edge so that there's just a little bit of level in here, where you can see sort of where otherwise neither of the sky panels is hitting much. And then the rim Kino is just giving us these little hits along the edges of things, which is super, super subtle. You probably can't even necessarily tell. This is the most apparent one. So that's sort of the idea with how we're creating that shape of light. We want a soft wrap going from bright to dark, but it's not a very significant change of bright to dark. The background Kino is giving us some contrast to break up the background. Whoopsie. And yeah, that's sort of our look. We played with putting a Joker as like a rim light, didn't really like it. We sort of played with a bunch of stuff, like I said, and ended up coming around to this. So the Kino in the back has a little diffusion on it just to help, because I think we were only running one bulb just to make it a little softer because it's a little bit bigger at that point. And we sort of backed it off and made it just this little extra kiss on that side. But so that was sort of the setup for that one. Camera is 422 HQ, 3.2K, 48 frames, and log C. Nothing else really special to note there. So at one point we did decide that we were just sick of fighting with the daylight, and so after the first 2 or 3 people, we built like a 12 by solid just to help control a little bit of that. I think it was because the background was just a little too hot, and so we wanted to get it a little more under control, and so we had to block out some of that ambient that was just bouncing all over. And that's also why this negative is here, is because some daylight bounce was hitting this edge. And so we had like our gradient that you can see in here, but it was adding a little highlight on this edge. And so the negative is just helping kill that highlight. So we have our gradient, we have our dark to light wrap. And we did have to sort of, depending on the person and their height and stuff, we would adjust a little bit. And like skin tone, where maybe we would bring the key sky panel up or down a little bit. Maybe we would dial the output a little bit just to help get it where we wanted it. But that was pretty much it. And so we had these people come through. They had a mark. I would hit record, and I would actually sort of walk away and let the director do his thing, because he was just running through some stuff with them, and I didn't really have to stand there and be in the way the whole time. So here's a little more. Let me see if there's anything else good in here. This is sort of the same thing. Here you can see the diffusion on the rim one, which is what's creating this little edge right here. So that part of his head is what can see that light, and so that's why it's lighting up. Sky panels on a budget. Kino Select 30s. I mean, it depends on what you want out of the sky panel. Kino Selects are RGB panels, and so they can do a lot of the stuff the sky panel can with like color effects and stuff. But as far as just like soft sources, I mean, a Kino is basically a sky panel if you just want like daylight tungsten. But the really nice thing about the sky panel is it's like fully dimmable, and you can push like plus and minus green and all these other things, like throw a straw gel on it without actually having to gel it, which saves time. Let me go back through this real quick. It's just another angle. You can see of where our key sky panel, center sky panel, camera, director, negatives. I don't think you ever really see much more than that. But that was sort of the layout of the land. And I guess I'll really briefly talk about this setup. I don't know if I even have a frame for this one, though. Let me see. The hair light, is that an LED? What hair light? There isn't technically a hair light. The closest thing to a hair light is that background Kino. Because that Joker never actually got turned on. So yeah, the closest thing is this, which is fluorescent. But the hair is just getting picked up mainly by a combination of either the rim Kino or the top sky panel. So the one other shot that I thought was cool. Let me see real quick. I might have it in here because I have some behind the scenes pictures. But like I said, I don't really have the footage for this stuff. Okay, cool. We can use this, I guess. So this isn't like a perfect frame, but we had to shoot this slow-mo scene of a girl sort of like dancing while glitter falls everywhere. And so we had to do it in the same studio. And so what we did was we decided that we wanted this like white clean look. The director had sort of a reference for what he wanted it to look like. And so we decided to shoot into this corner to the left of all our backdrops and everything. But we wanted to add some like depth to it. And so we put a Joker 1600 outside the door on the fire escape. Yeah, we're lighting all off 709 in camera. So the Amira does 709. You can set how it's set up, but we have it set up so it's recording log C, but it's sending 709 out on the SDI in the EVF. And you can change which LUTs it's using, but so I just usually set it to the standard RE709, nothing fancy. But yeah, like you can see here, it's a 709 look. So we have a Joker 1600 creating these sort of like window outlines, like direct sunlight coming through just to break it up. And again, we're sort of, you can see in here, I don't know that I don't have this wide frame, unfortunately, because I don't have the footage, but light on the left, dark in the middle with light subject on top of it, and then some light on the right side. And so we're making those light, dark layers. And so we threw this hard source to help make these edges. And then we didn't want her in the hard source. I was honestly sort of okay with it. Director and client, I think, wanted it to be a little more beautiful, which is understandable. It makes sense for the scene. So we pulled her a little in front of the hard light and put a sky panel right over here to create some soft light just for her. So she's in this little pool of soft light coming from the same direction as the hard light, so the motivation hopefully feels okay. I think we pushed both of them with like they're a little warm. I don't remember if it's CTO or CTS, but we were pushing like a quarter or a half warm, I want to say. And that was pretty much it for lighting. But then we did decide, so we were playing with this whole throwing glitter thing. And here you can see where the Joker's out there coming through here. Sky panel is casting our softer light on her. I could have sworn I had another picture of this. Oh, you can sort of see it here. So if you see these other shadows, it's because we had people all on glitter throwing duty. But it was because we ended up taking a few other lights. There's a Lico, I want to say, right here. And then there's another Joker over camera right. And we just sort of had them casting beams in front of the camera, which you can't see in camera. But when we'd throw glitter into them, it would make all the glitter light up. Because otherwise it was just dark. So we needed the glitter to reflect highlights. So we threw a couple extra beams of light just for the glitter. So we shot that all at 200 frames per second. Really interested to see what it looks like in motion. But this was a frame of sort of how it looked in a still grab. So that's another Chicago look. We shot a bunch of stuff in the hospital, but I'm not going to break that down here. I'll save that for some other video. And so those are a few setups, 5 setups, 6 setups, something like that from my 3 shoots last week. Oh, I'm going to stand up for a second because this standing desk thing is beating me up a little. Oh, let's do this real quick. There's my Aputure front light, there's my tungsten light, and there's my DS1. Blam. Let's kick this back over here. I've ruined everything. Okay, so let's flip this guy real quick. Cool. So that's that, I guess. Hopefully that's helpful. Does anyone have other questions? If you have other questions, feel free to hit me with them, and I'm happy to run through them. But, it's just a lot of balancing, sort of looking at a location and looking at what a location needs and trying to do your best to facilitate fixing it. Trying to understand the feel of the piece and of the scene and whether we need soft or hard or contrast or brighter or darker. So like tonally, this is almost sort of similar to Dale's interview that we went through, and that it sort of has some hard background hits and softer light on talent. But the darks never go quite as dark as Dale's, because this is a brighter, happier thing. And so a lot of those same sort of visual cues can play. But in the Dale story, to make it more dramatic, we let the shadows fall darker and lower in our exposure. And this stuff, since it's brighter and happier, shadows all fall a little higher, and that's true even of the colored backdrop stuff. Yeah, dude, I love these headphones. I use these on the plane. I use these when recording. I use them during this. They're 64 audio A4s. They're custom in-ear molds. They're not cheap though. They're like $1,000. But they sound awesome. They do have cheaper versions, but custom molds are the best. 64 audio. They used to be 1964 audio, but I think it's just 64 audio now. You do have to go to an audiologist, and they scan your brain and stuff for you, basically. Well, no, they just put a bunch of schmutz in your ear, silicone gel. I have a hard time believing that no one has questions. No one has any more questions about anything at all. Rental gear, flying, lighting, framing, anything. 64 audio. Dude, get some rest. It's only 10:30 here. It's not that bad. I've been spending this week resting a lot, though, honestly. So I'm glad I did this video. As much as it was supposed to be for patrons only. If you guys appreciate this kind of content, I do it a lot on Patreon. And you can find that at patreon.com/eborsier. We're trying to figure out how to do the live thing more. Sorry, I don't watch basketball. But if you're interested in this kind of thing, check out Patreon, check out the podcast, which you can find at supersecretfilmcast.com. I just did an episode with Kate Ayers-Mendy, and our next episode is going to be with Rena Yang, who's awesome. So if you want to ask her questions, you can do that on patreon.com/eborsier. But I try to break down my shoots as much as possible, and just sort of facilitate teaching people. But, yeah, so hopefully that's helpful to you guys. If you have questions, let me know. I'm an open book, but hopefully that stuff's helpful to you guys. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.